On a sweltering June afternoon in 2008, the quiet suburban neighborhood of Mesa, Arizona, was forever changed by a discovery that would send shockwaves through the community and beyond. Travis Alexander, a 30-year-old motivational speaker and salesman, was found brutally murdered in his own home. His body, discovered by concerned friends, bore the marks of a violent and frenzied attack. He had been stabbed 27 times, his throat was slit from ear to ear, and he had been shot in the head. The investigation quickly centered on Jodi Arias, Alexander's ex-girlfriend. Arias was a strikingly attractive woman with a troubled past and a complex relationship with Alexander. Born on July 9, 1980, in Salinas, California, Arias had a tumultuous upbringing marked by strict parenting and a series of failed relationships. She met Travis Alexander in September 2006 at a business conference in Las Vegas, and their attraction was immediate and intense. Despite their instant connection, their relationship was fraught with difficulties from the start. Alexander, a devout Mormon, struggled with the guilt of engaging in premarital sex with Arias, which was against his religious beliefs. This internal conflict led to a turbulent on-again, off-again relationship, filled with passion, jealousy, and frequent arguments. Friends of Alexander noted that Arias was becoming increasingly obsessed with him, even after he attempted to end their relationship. As their relationship deteriorated, Arias's behavior became more erratic. She moved to Mesa to be closer to Alexander, despite his efforts to distance himself. She hacked into his social media accounts, slashed his tires and stalked him, actions that deeply unsettled both Alexander and his friends. Yet Alexander, torn between his feelings of guilt and his lingering affection for Arias, continued to see her sporadically. The final rupture came when Alexander planned a trip to Cancun, Mexico with another woman and decided to end things with Arias once and for all. Devastated and enraged by this rejection, Arias began meticulously planning her next move. She borrowed gas cans to avoid leaving a trail, purchased a gun, and set off on a road trip to confront Alexander. What happened next would become the centerpiece of a sensational murder trial, capturing the attention of the media and the public alike. The tale of Jodi Arias and Travis Alexander is one of fatal obsession, blending elements of passion, jealousy, and brutal violence into a story that would haunt the community and resonate across the nation. Jodi Arias was born on July 9, 1980, in Salinas, California, into a family with strict parenting. Her early years were marked by a rebellious streak, as she sought independence from her overbearing parents. After dropping out of high school, Arias worked various jobs, including as a waitress and a photographer, in a bid to support herself and find her own path. Arias's romantic life was tumultuous, characterized by a series of unstable relationships. Each failed relationship seemed to deepen her sense of insecurity and longing for stability. This pattern of seeking validation through romantic attachments set the stage for her obsessive relationship with Travis Alexander. Travis Alexander, born on July 28, 1977 in Riverside, California, had a challenging childhood. He faced numerous hardships, including an abusive household, which pushed him to seek solace in his Mormon faith. Through sheer determination, Alexander turned his life around, becoming a successful motivational speaker and salesman. His vibrant personality and strong work ethic made him well liked and respected in his community. Alexander's commitment to his faith was a central aspect of his identity. He adhered to the teachings of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which included strict guidelines on chastity and moral conduct. This commitment, however, was tested by his relationship with Jodi Arias. The guilt of engaging in premarital sex with Arias weighed heavily on him, creating an internal conflict that complicated their relationship. The relationship between Arias and Alexander was marked by intense passion and frequent turbulence. After meeting at the business conference, they quickly became romantically involved. Arias converted to Mormonism, and their relationship initially seemed promising. However, the differences in their backgrounds and Alexander's internal struggle with guilt led to frequent arguments and breakups. Despite the volatility, there was a magnetic pull between them that neither could fully resist. Arias's obsession with Alexander grew, manifesting in increasingly erratic behavior. She moved from California to Mesa, Arizona, to be closer to him, despite his attempts to end the relationship. Her actions, such as hacking into his social media accounts and slashing his tires, raised alarms among Alexander's friends, who began to fear for his safety. Their relationship reached a breaking point when Alexander decided to move on and plan a future without Arias. His decision to take another woman to Cancun signaled a definitive end to their tumultuous affair. This rejection fueled Arias's obsessive tendencies, leading her to take drastic measures. She meticulously planned a trip to confront Alexander, borrowing gas cans and purchasing a gun, setting the stage for the tragic events that would follow. The relationship between Jodi Arias and Travis Alexander was a roller coaster of intense emotions, marked by passion, jealousy, and frequent conflicts. Despite their initial chemistry and Arias's conversion to Mormonism to be closer to Alexander, their relationship quickly became toxic. Alexander's devout Mormon faith clashed with his physical relationship with Arias, causing him immense guilt. This internal struggle led to numerous breakups and reconciliations, as Alexander oscillated between his desire for Arias and his commitment to his faith. Arias's obsession with Alexander deepened over time. Her behavior grew increasingly erratic and possessive. She moved to Mesa, Arizona, to be near him, even after he attempted to end their relationship. Arias's actions, such as hacking into Alexander's social media accounts and slashing his tires, alarmed his friends and hinted at her escalating instability. By the spring of 2008, Travis Alexander had resolved to move on from Jodi Arias. He began dating other women and planned a trip to Cancun, Mexico, with another woman. This decision devastated Arias, who saw it as the ultimate rejection. Fueled by a mix of heartbreak and rage, Arias began to meticulously plan her next move. In the days leading up to June 4, 2008, Arias borrowed gas cans from an ex-boyfriend, purchased a .25 caliber handgun, and set off on a road trip to confront Alexander. The gas cans allowed her to avoid leaving a paper trail of her journey, indicating premeditation. She drove from her home in Eureka, California, to Mesa, Arizona, under the guise of visiting friends and attending a conference. On June 4th, Arias arrived at Alexander's home. They spent the day together, and at some point, they engaged in what Arias later described as rough sex. The exact sequence of events leading up to the murder remains unclear, but what is certain is that a violent altercation ensued, resulting in Alexander's brutal death. He was stabbed 27 times, his throat was slit, and he was shot in the head. Friends of Alexander, concerned after not hearing from him for several days, went to his house on June 9, 2008. Upon entering, they were met with a horrific scene: Alexander's lifeless body in the shower, surrounded by blood. The grisly discovery shocked the close-knit community and set off an intense investigation. The police quickly zeroed in on Jodi Arias as a suspect. Despite her initial claims of not being in Arizona at the time of the murder, evidence soon painted a different picture. Investigators found a camera in Alexander's washing machine that contained deleted but recoverable photos of Arias and Alexander together on the day of the murder. The final images, time-stamped just before Alexander's death, showed him in the shower, followed by accidental photos taken during the attack. The events of June 4, 2008, culminated in a violent and bloody confrontation that would leave an indelible mark on all involved. Jodi Arias, driven by a potent mix of jealousy, obsession, and rage, had traveled over 1,000 miles to confront Travis Alexander. After spending a portion of the day together, including a sexual encounter that Arias would later describe in detail, the situation took a horrific turn. In the late afternoon, as Alexander showered, Arias attacked him. The violence was extreme and frenzied. Alexander was stabbed 27 times. His throat was slit so deeply that he was nearly decapitated, and he was shot in the head. The brutality of the attack suggested not only a desire to kill, but to inflict maximum suffering. Investigators would later surmise that the attack began in the bathroom, with Alexander attempting to defend himself and escape, only to be relentlessly pursued by Arias until he succumbed to his injuries. Following the murder, Arias went to great lengths to cover her tracks. She meticulously cleaned the crime scene, disposing of evidence and staging the scene to delay discovery. Despite her efforts, she made several critical mistakes. The most damning piece of evidence was a digital camera found in the washing machine. Although Arias had attempted to destroy it, forensic experts were able to recover deleted photos from the memory card. These photos provided a chilling timeline of the day's events, showing Arias and Alexander together just before the murder, and accidental shots taken during the attack, including one showing a bloodied Alexander and another appearing to capture Arias's foot. In the days following the murder, Arias crafted an elaborate alibi. She contacted Alexander multiple times, leaving voicemails and sending emails to give the impression she was unaware of his death. She also attended a conference and visited friends to establish her presence elsewhere. However, her behavior and inconsistencies in her story quickly aroused suspicion. The true horror of the crime was unveiled on June 9, 2008, when friends, worried about Alexander's absence and failed communications, entered his home and discovered his body. The scene was gruesome and chaotic, with clear signs of a struggle and excessive violence. The discovery shocked the community and prompted an immediate police investigation. From the outset, detectives focused on Arias as a prime suspect. Her erratic behavior, history with Alexander, and the recovered evidence from the crime scene pointed directly to her involvement. Despite her initial denials and subsequent shifting stories, the forensic evidence was overwhelming. Blood samples, fingerprints, and the crucial photographic evidence from the digital camera all corroborated her presence at the scene and her role in the murder. As the investigation progressed, Arias was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Her arrest marked the beginning of a legal saga that would capture national attention and reveal the full extent of the obsession and violence that had led to Alexander's tragic death. Following the gruesome discovery of Travis Alexander's body, the Mesa Police Department launched an extensive investigation. The evidence found at the crime scene, particularly the digital camera and the forensic analysis, pointed conclusively to Jodi Arias. Despite her initial denials, Arias's alibi quickly unraveled under scrutiny. On July 15, 2008, she was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Arias initially claimed she was not in Mesa at the time of the murder, stating she was on a road trip to Utah to visit a new love interest. However, the photographic evidence recovered from the camera, including time-stamped images of Arias and Alexander together just before the murder, directly contradicted her claims. Additionally, a palm print in blood matching both Arias's and Alexander's was found at the scene, further solidifying the case against her. The news of Travis Alexander's murder and the subsequent arrest of Jodi Arias shocked the community. Alexander was well liked and respected, and his violent death left many in disbelief. The media quickly picked up on the story, and it became a sensational case due to the dramatic elements of the crime, including the tumultuous relationship between Arias and Alexander and the brutal nature of the murder. Friends and family of Alexander were devastated. They described him as a kind and motivated individual whose life was cut tragically short. The community rallied around his family, offering support during the difficult times following his death. The case attracted widespread media attention, becoming one of the most followed trials in recent history. The sensational details of the crime, combined with Arias's changing stories and the dramatic courtroom proceedings, captivated the public. News outlets covered every development, from the investigation to the trial, turning Arias into a household name. The media scrutiny added another layer of complexity to the case. Arias's defense team argued that the intense media coverage could prejudice the jury, making it difficult to ensure a fair trial. Despite these concerns, the trial proceeded, drawing in viewers from across the country who were eager to see the dramatic legal battle unfold. As the case moved to trial, both the prosecution and defense prepared for a fierce legal battle. The prosecution, led by Juan Martinez, aimed to prove that Arias had meticulously planned and executed the murder out of jealousy and rage. They presented evidence of premeditation, including the borrowed gas cans and the purchased gun, to show that Arias had intended to kill Alexander from the outset. The defense, on the other hand, portrayed Arias as a victim of abuse who acted in self-defense. They argued that Alexander had been controlling and abusive, and that Arias had killed him in a desperate attempt to protect herself. This narrative was supported by Arias's own testimony, in which she described instances of alleged abuse and detailed the events leading up to the fatal confrontation. The trial would soon reveal the full extent of the dramatic and violent relationship between Jodi Arias and Travis Alexander, laying bare the intricate details of their interactions and the fatal consequences of their obsessions. The trial of Jodi Arias began on January 2, 2013, and quickly became a media spectacle. The courtroom was packed with journalists and spectators eager to witness the dramatic proceedings. Prosecutor Juan Martinez portrayed Arias as a calculating and jealous ex-girlfriend who meticulously planned the murder of Travis Alexander. He argued that the crime was premeditated, pointing to the gas cans Arias borrowed to avoid leaving a traceable route and the gun she had stolen from her grandparents' home. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence against Arias. This included the recovered photographs from Alexander's camera, which showed the couple together on the day of the murder, followed by images of Alexander bleeding and ultimately deceased. The forensic evidence, such as the mixed DNA found in a bloody palm print on the wall, further implicated Arias. Martinez's aggressive questioning aimed to dismantle any semblance of a self-defense argument. The defense, led by Kirk Nurmi, painted a starkly different picture. They argued that Arias had acted in self-defense after years of abuse at the hands of Alexander. Arias took the stand in her own defense, a move that is relatively rare in criminal trials, and her testimony stretched over 18 days. She described a tumultuous relationship filled with emotional, physical, and sexual abuse, claiming that the fatal altercation began after Alexander became enraged during a photo session. Arias's detailed accounts of abuse aimed to elicit sympathy and provide context for her actions. The defense introduced expert witnesses, including psychologists, to support their narrative that Arias suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and battered woman syndrome. These experts argued that her actions on the day of the murder were driven by a psychological response to prolonged abuse rather than premeditation. Psychological experts played a crucial role in the trial. The prosecution's expert, Dr. Janine DeMart, challenged the defense's psychological assessments, stating that Arias did not suffer from PTSD, but instead exhibited traits consistent with borderline personality disorder. This diagnosis suggested that Arias's actions were driven by a fear of abandonment and intense emotional volatility rather than a response to abuse. In contrast, the defense's expert, Dr. Richard Samuels, testified that Arias had indeed suffered from PTSD as a result of the trauma from the killing. He argued that her memory gaps and erratic behavior were consistent with someone who had experienced severe psychological stress. The conflicting testimonies from these experts highlighted the complexities of diagnosing mental health conditions and their implications for criminal behavior. The trial's extensive media coverage influenced public perception and added pressure on all parties involved. Daily updates, live broadcasts, and sensational headlines turned the trial into a national obsession. The intense scrutiny sometimes bordered on spectacle, with commentators and the public weighing in on every detail of the proceedings. The high-profile nature of the case raised questions about the fairness of the trial. Arias's defense team argued that the pervasive media coverage could bias the jury and affect the trial's outcome. Despite these concerns, the trial continued, and the jury remained sequestered to minimize outside influence. As the trial drew to a close, both sides delivered compelling closing arguments, leaving the jury with the challenging task of sifting through the emotional and complex evidence presented over the previous months. The nation waited with bated breath for the verdict, which would determine the fate of Jodi Arias and the justice for Travis Alexander. After months of intense testimony and dramatic courtroom exchanges, the jury in Jodi Arias's trial reached a verdict on May 8, 2013. Arias was found guilty of first-degree murder in the death of Travis Alexander. The jury unanimously agreed that the murder was premeditated, rejecting Arias's claims of self-defense. The verdict brought a sense of relief and justice to Alexander's family and friends, who had endured the painful details of his death throughout the trial. Following the conviction, the trial moved into the sentencing phase, where the same jury was tasked with deciding whether Arias should receive the death penalty. This phase of the trial was equally contentious, with emotional testimonies from both sides. The prosecution argued for the death penalty, citing the brutal and premeditated nature of the crime, while the defense pleaded for mercy, highlighting Arias's lack of prior criminal history and the psychological factors that may have influenced her actions. Despite the jury finding Arias eligible for the death penalty, they were unable to reach a unanimous decision on her sentence, As a result, a mistrial was declared for the sentencing phase. A second penalty phase trial in 2014 also ended in a hung jury. Ultimately, Judge Sherry Stevens sentenced Arias to life in prison without the possibility of parole on April 13, 2015, bringing an end to the lengthy legal saga. The Jodi Arias case left an indelible mark on the community of Mesa, Arizona, and on the broader public's consciousness. It highlighted the devastating effects of obsessive relationships and the potential for violence lurking beneath the surface of seemingly normal lives. The intense media scrutiny and public fascination with the case underscored society's enduring interest in true crime stories, particularly those involving dramatic and sensational elements. The trial also raised important questions about the role of the media in high-profile criminal cases. The extensive coverage and often sensationalized reporting had a significant impact on public perception and, potentially, the proceedings themselves. This case serves as a stark reminder of the need for balanced and responsible journalism, especially when dealing with matters of life and death. For Travis Alexander's family and friends, the verdict brought a measure of closure, but the pain of losing him in such a violent manner remains. They continue to honor his memory and advocate against domestic violence, hoping that his tragic story can serve as a cautionary tale and help prevent similar incidents in the future. For Jodi Arias, the trial and its aftermath marked the beginning of a life behind bars. Despite her claims of self-defense and abuse, the evidence and jury's verdict painted a different picture, one of a woman driven by jealousy and obsession to commit an unthinkable act. Her story remains a topic of discussion and analysis, particularly in the fields of criminal psychology and forensic investigation. The events that unfolded in Mesa in June 2008 and the subsequent legal proceedings have left a lasting legacy. They serve as a sobering reminder of the complexities of human relationships, the potential for hidden darkness, and the far-reaching consequences of actions driven by unchecked emotions.